There is the version of you that showed up, and there is the version that was somewhere else entirely, the version that was already in tomorrow, already in the conversation that hasn't happened yet, already rehearsing, already planning, already somewhere that wasn't here. The body in the room, the coffee getting cold, the person across from you saying something, and you nodding, present in every way except the one that mattered. You know both versions, you've lived both versions, you probably live both versions today. Most days it was the second version that showed up, and most days nobody noticed, including you. The autopilot is not a failure. That's the first thing worth saying. It is a function. The mind learned correctly that not everything requires full attention, that some things can be done on a lower setting. The familiar route, the routine task, the conversation that follows a predictable shape. And so it built a system, a way of moving through the ordinary parts of life without spending everything on them. The problem is not the system. The problem is that the system expanded. What began as a way of conserving attention for the things that mattered became a way of moving through almost everything. The autopilot that was supposed to handle the commute started handling the dinner. The one that was supposed to manage the routine started managing the relationships. The one that was supposed to free you for presence started replacing it. And somewhere in that expansion, weeks began to disappear. Not dramatically, not in the way that would be easy to notice and name, just quietly, the way water disappears from a glass that no one is watching. You look up and the week is gone, and you cannot account for it. You look up and the month is gone. You look up and something has changed. A season, a child's face, the light coming through a window, and you realize you were there for all of it and somehow missed it anyway. That is what the autopilot costs. Not the dramatic things, the quiet ones, the light in the late afternoon that only exists for about 11 minutes before it shifts into something different. The way the person you love laughs when they don't know you're watching. Not the social laugh, the real one, the particular quality of a Tuesday morning in a season you won't get back. The conversation that could have gone somewhere real if someone had asked one more question. None of these things announce themselves as significant. That's precisely the point. They were ordinary. They were the texture of a day, not the headline of it. And the second version, the one already in tomorrow, moved through them without registering that they were happening. This is not a tragedy. It is something quieter than a tragedy. It is the accumulation of small absences that don't feel like loss in the moment, because in the moment there's always something more pressing to be elsewhere for. But they add up. The small absences add up into a life that passed mostly in the background, a life that you were technically present for and somehow didn't quite inhabit. A life that, when you look back on certain periods of it, feels strangely thin. Not because nothing happened, but because you weren't quite there when it did. There is a particular way of living that is organized almost entirely around what hasn't happened yet, around the version of things that will exist after this resolves, after the situation improves, after the uncertain thing becomes certain, after you finish this phase and move into the next one, which will surely feel more like your actual life than this one does. It is a reasonable way to live. It makes sense. The present is often incomplete, unresolved, uncomfortable, not quite what you imagined. The future, by contrast, is still available for improvement. You can still make it what you need it to be. So the attention moves there, forward, into the version of things that hasn't arrived yet, but might finally be the one where you feel fully present. The difficulty is that the future never arrives as the future. It arrives as now, always as now. The thing you were waiting for becomes the present moment, which immediately feels incomplete again, uncomfortable again, not quite what you imagined. And so the attention moves forward again, into the next version, the next resolution, the next phase that will finally feel like a real life. And in the movement between what is and what might be, the actual texture of living, this day, this hour, this ordinary, unremarkable now, passes without being inhabited. It was always going to be now. It was only ever going to be now. Martin Heidegger, A philosopher who spent his life thinking about what it means to exist made a distinction that has stayed with me. He said that most people live in what he called the inauthentic mode. Not inauthentic in the moral sense, not dishonest, not performing. Inauthentic in the sense of living according to what one does, what one thinks, what one says, the anonymous, impersonal way of moving through the world that requires no real presence because it follows a script that has already been written. And then there is what he called authentic existence, the mode where a person actually inhabits their own life, where the choices are genuinely chosen, where the moments are genuinely met, where the fact of being here is not something that happens in the background, but something that is, however briefly, fully received. He believed authentic existence was rare, not because people were failing, but because the pull toward the inauthentic, toward the automatic, the anticipated, the elsewhere, is simply very strong. It requires almost nothing of us, and presence requires everything. What he was describing, the life lived mostly in the inauthentic mode, moving through without inhabiting, is not a character flaw. It is the most common human condition. It is also not inevitable. Presence is not a practice. That is the first thing to understand. It is not something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and carry with you through the day. It is not a technique you apply when you remember to. It is not one more item on a list of things you should be doing better. The version of presence that gets sold as a skill, a discipline, an achievement is already a distraction from the thing itself. Because the moment you are trying to be present, you are managing your experience rather than inhabiting it. You are watching yourself from a slight distance. You are performing attention rather than giving it. Real presence is not manufactured. It is what remains when the managing stops, when the planning pauses, when the mind for a moment stops producing its constant commentary on what is happening and simply lets what is happening arrive. It cannot be forced, but it can be noticed. The moments when it appears naturally, unexpectedly, without effort. The moment the coffee is actually tasted. The moment the conversation actually lands. The moment the light through the window is actually seen. Those moments are not achievements. They are arrivals, and they are available more often than you think. Not, how do I become more present? That question leads back into the managing, back into the trying, back into the performance of attention that is already its own kind of absence. What would it mean to stop waiting for your life to feel like your life? Not to fix it, not to improve it into something that finally deserves your full attention, just to receive it, as it is, incomplete and ordinary and not quite what you imagined, and to be here for it anyway. Because the life that was happening while you were waiting for your life to begin, it was your life. It was always your life. The Tuesday that felt like a placeholder was not a placeholder. The ordinary conversation was not a rehearsal. The unremarkable afternoon was not a waiting room. It was the thing itself. And it is still the thing itself right now. Whatever this moment is, however incomplete, however unresolved, however far from what you imagined, this is it. The life you were waiting for is the one you are already living. You just forgot to notice. The second version will keep showing up. That is not a problem to be solved. The mind will keep moving toward tomorrow, toward the resolution, toward the version of things that feels more like real life. That is what minds do. And there is no technique that stops it permanently, no practice that installs presence as a permanent state. But there is something smaller than that, something that doesn't require discipline or consistency or any particular effort. Just the occasional return, the moment you notice you were somewhere else, in tomorrow, in the better version, in the thing that hasn't happened yet, and you come back, not dramatically, not with effort, just a small return to here, to this, to whatever ordinary, unremarkable moment is currently happening and has been happening without you, just you, here for a moment before the mind moves on again. For anyone who found this at the right moment, or maybe the moment found them, there is more here. This channel exists for the quiet spaces between everything else, for the questions that don't have clean answers, for the moments when something ordinary suddenly feels worth paying attention to, Subscribe so the next one arrives when it should. And if something in this one landed somewhere real, a comment goes a long way. What stayed with you? What are you sitting with now?